Hey, what's up everyone? Back with another video on the Qiewa Q1 Hummer. This one is basically going to be what type of tools you might need if you have one of these or are getting one of these and want to know what type of tools you need to do maintenance and such, tighten up things on the scooter. As I go through different places where the tools are used and what tools used where, there's a couple of tips I'll give you on some things that might help you out with your scooter, mainly on the steering, tightening up the steering, handlebars, the steering mechanism and such. All right, so let's get into this. First of all, here's a bunch of tools I got laying here, and some of these are maybe, you probably don't have to have all these. For example, if you have an adjustable crescent wrench, you could get away with that instead of having these different sized box wrenches. Personally, I prefer box wrenches for strength, and you know you got a good tight fit on it. As opposed to maybe where you have the crescent wrench not quite tightened down enough or something, we could strip the edges of some bolts or something. Beyond that, we got some specialty tools here, like this crescent wrench that you can see is kind of very thin. It's kind of like a half crescent wrench or so, and so we'll get into where those things are needed. I also have a meter here. You probably don't need that, but that's good to have if you ever want to know the voltage your battery's truly at, or to be able to test your charger out, make sure it's charging to its full capabilities. Don't have to have that, but I'll go through that. That's stuff that it's nice to have if you can get. So start out with, let's look at probably the most used tool we have on with the scooter is the Allen wrenches. Okay, so this is a set I got. It's all millimeter. Everything on a scooter is millimeter. And this set here, I've removed some of them, so I only have in here what is actually used on a scooter. So you can see I have a 2.5 millimeter, a 3 millimeter, 4 millimeter, a 5 millimeter, 6 millimeter, and an 8 millimeter. This particular set also came with a 10, a 2, and a 1.5. So you might want to just go look for something like this, a full set like this, and you're going to get pretty much everything you need right there. Okay, so let's get started. I'm just going to go over the different points on a scooter one by one, show you what size is used where, and then you can maybe make a better determination of what you think you might want to pick up if you don't already have it. Okay, first thing that I find incredibly handy is, it's not a tool, but rather a stool, some sort of a sturdy stool like this that can hold 60 pounds. The weight of the scooter is 60 pounds. It's nice to get the thing off the ground so you're not like crawling on the ground trying to tighten stuff up. Get it elevated a little bit, it makes it a lot easier. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of start at the handlebars and go over each component and what size you need to tighten, loosen the screw on it, adjust it, whatever. I'm only going to do things that are stock from the scooter, so I'm not going to bother going over like my hand grips or my phone attachment or my lights or any of this other stuff. Just stuff that's stock on the scooter. And then I'll just kind of go across the handlebars, go down the stem, showing you the different screws that you might need to tighten. Go along the body, and then of course the wheels. Okay, so on mine, the first thing I come to off the handlebar is my brake lever. So another thing you might want to loosen this for is the positioning of the lever if you don't like where it is. If some people might want it higher up, higher up on the handle, so up here or down here lower. Mine I kind of like just like right about there, but you can loosen this and then change the angle of that to fit your needs. Okay, so if you look on the bottom of it, and this is the one right here that you would use to loosen or tighten it, so you can adjust that. And that screw is going to be your 5 millimeter Allen wrench. You'll also notice this nut here. Don't mess with that unless it happens to be loose, and then tighten that up. But that's all with your brake handle and the spring that's in there. So you don't want to take that off, or it might be pretty hard to get that back together if that spring comes out. Okay, next is the light horn switch, and again you can loosen this one to adjust the angle wherever you might want it, or tighten it up if it comes loose. And if we look underneath there's a smaller Allen screw right in there, and that's going to be the 2.5 millimeter Allen key. All right, moving over to the other handlebar, we have our display / throttle component here. And if we look on the bottom of that, here's the Allen screw for that. And this is going to be 3 millimeter Allen screw for your throttle. Again, you can loosen it, adjust the angle of where you want the throttle at. Okay, then of course we have our other brake lever on the side, and just like the other side, the Allen screw on this one is 5 millimeter. Okay, here's a tip with your brake handles, your brake levers. If you notice on the front, there's a threaded piece right here that you could unscrew like this, or screw in tight like that on both sides. This actually is a small adjustment for your brakes. So actually, if you unscrew this or thread it so it moves this way away from your brake handle, such as this, and it's very small adjustment. If you move it, unthread it so it comes out this way, you're actually going to be moving your brake pad in a little bit, so that should give you tighter braking. So that's a way you can adjust your brakes without actually having to go mess with the braking system while you're out riding or something. You feel you don't have enough brakes, you could unscrew this a little bit. I don't know how much you can see there, but basically the screw goes in about to where my fingernail is there. So you could unthread that thing back out maybe to about here and give yourself some increased braking. So that's tip number one. Have one on each side. You also have that same mechanism down on the brake caliper itself. You could thread this out, which again is going to take that outer pad and move it in slightly towards the rotor. And then again, same thing on the back, right here. And you can see on mine, I have it adjusted out a little bit on my back one. So if I were to screw this in, it would pull this outer brake pad out a little bit more. If I were to thread it back more out this way, it would push it in even more. So I've already used this to do a slight adjustment to my brake pad. Okay, next going down the handlebars is on the front of the scooter. I've kind of got this bag strap in the way here, but you can see this Allen screw here. It goes through the handlebars, the square part of the handlebars, and there's another one on the other side. Okay, now these aren't both screws. This side here, that's on the inner side to where you stand, is kind of like a long threaded nut that sticks all the way through. And then this front side, the front side is actually the screw. So if you go to tighten these, do it from the front. The back side you don't need to worry about unless it's spinning, which it probably won't. But the front side is the actual screw where you would do the tightening and loosening. You can probably crank on this side all day long and you're not going to move it because it's really not a screw. It's basically a long nut that sticks through the handlebars. Again, the screw is on this side. And what you might want to do this for is if you have excessive play in your handlebars that you don't like, in other words, moving up and down. Mine are pretty tight right now, but the handlebars fold by pushing this back. I've got mine really tightened up, so it'd be hard to show you on this one right now. But this mechanism pushes back in. It's spring loaded, so if you push that back, the idea is then you can fold your handlebars down. If this screw, these screws in the front here, if they're really loose, then when you've got it up in place like this, and it's not going to go anywhere because this is going to hold it from folding, but you could have a little bit of play in your handlebars where they go up and down a little bit. If you want to tighten that up, again, use the screw on the front of the scooter, right there, and on the other side, again, sorry, I've got my bag on there, so it's kind of covering the screws. There's one behind there too. And tighten that up, and that should take care of some of the play if your handlebars kind of go up and down like the folding mechanism when they're locked into place like this. By the same right, like mine are really tight right now, so I might have trouble folding these handlebars if I wanted to. I don't really fold it up really hardly ever, so that's why I've tightened mine so much. It's nice and solid. But if you have trouble folding your handlebars down, even after you pull this thing out, you might need to loosen this screw a little bit. And that screw is going to be the 4 millimeter Allen wrench. Okay, that's pretty much it for the handlebars themselves. Let's go ahead and move on down the stem. First I want to show you there's these two screws, one on either side. Right there. And right in there, the inner one on this oval part right down here on the bottom there. This oval piece where it meets here, if those two screws are loose, this will actually move a little bit on this part here, so you could see that shift back and forth, which would give your steering handles a little bit of a wobble back and forth. So you want to tighten those up, and actually I would recommend getting some Loctite or some sort of thread sealer like this, and taking those two screws out, putting some thread sealer in, and that's tightening them down. And those two screws are 3mm, your 3mm Allen wrench. Next we have this clamping mechanism that is composed of a few different parts. One, there's this latch that you can fold across here. Two, there's an Allen screw, and this is again going to be your 5mm for this, and that tightens up that clamp a little bit. And then on the other side here, I've modified mine. Originally, in this hole where I have this big sheet metal screw, normally it's just a small hole with a tiny grub screw inside of it. And that grub screw, what it does is when you tighten it down, it goes into that groove in the round handlebar there, or in the stem. And the idea is when you tighten that grub screw down, it keeps the handlebars from moving this way because that grub screw's in that groove there. Okay, that's all good and fine, but that grub screw is really tiny, and it kept backing out on me, and I kept getting, just a little bit of movement on the handlebars this way, which I didn't care a whole lot for. So what I did, and I don't raise and lower my handlebars. I got them set where I want, and that's where they're going to stay. My son's got a scooter, so there's not more than one person riding the scooter. So what I did, I got the handlebars set to where I want, and instead of using that grub screw, I took the grub screw out, which would normally go in the hole where this sheet metal screw is, and then I actually, holding the handlebars straight, having somebody holding the handlebars straight, and that you want them as perfectly straight as possible, I drilled through that hole into the round part of the handlebar inside the groove there at the height where I needed them, and then I actually installed this sheet metal screw. So instead of just a little grub screw pushing against the metal in that groove, I've got a sheet metal screw that's actually going through a hole into that round part of the stem, and I've used Loctite thread sealer on that and cranked down on that sheet metal screw, and that thing's solid as a rock. It doesn't move at all whatsoever, obviously now because there's a screw going into it instead of a screw just pressing against the side of it. And should that back out a little bit, all I got to do is tighten that screw down a little bit, and it's rock solid again. So that's tip 2. If you have problems and you don't like your handlebars going back and forth like this, and you're finding that you constantly are adjusting that little grub screw that's in there, you might want to think about doing this. Again, make sure you're holding the handlebars perfectly straight, and then drill straight through that into the metal, into the groove. So you put a hole in there, and then you can just thread a screw all the way into there, and that's going to make that thing solid from that point on. I've done some other videos on handlebar tightening and such, steering tightening, and I've gone over that and that as well. So just to finish this up, again, you have a 5mm on this screw right here. Okay, so I loosened that a little bit so now I can get my clamp shut tight. Once you've got that clamp closed like that, then you can go in here and tighten that up nice. And when you tighten that up nice, you got this screw here tightened nice, the one that I put in there for the grub screw, that sheet metal screw, and you got these two bottom screws tightened nice. This thing's going to be nice and solid. Shouldn't get any side-to-side movement on your handlebars or your steering stem. Okay, moving down the stem from there, next thing we come to is our headlights. And should you ever need to take those apart or reposition them, there's a screw on both sides, one on either side there. And that's going to be the 3mm Allen wrench, 3mm. Okay, moving down from there, and let's start heading to the frame now. We'll do the wheels last. We have these 3 screw/nut combinations, same as like the ones up on the handlebars. One end's a screw, one end's the nut on the other side. And I've never had to tighten these. These things have always remained tight, so I've never had to mess with them. But it's the 5mm, again, the 5mm Allen key for these three on both sides. If you were going to tighten or loosen those, maybe if you were replacing your steering stem or something, you would probably need to get two of these 5mm, one for each side. And then next to those, you just have a typical Phillips head screw there. And then heading further down this piece towards the chassis, you'll come to this pivot bolt here. And that's a 4mm. This is a 4mm right here. There's another one on the other side again. And this should be somewhat loose. This can't be cranked too tight because this is a pivot point. And let me just show you here with mine. If I put that in there, it spins pretty easy, and that's because the one on the other side is spinning with it. But again, that's a pivot point, one of the pivot points for this handle folding mechanism. So that you don't want that, cranked down too tight, or you're going to have trouble folding it. Okay, from there, let's jump around the front here, and you have this mechanism here with the springs on it, and there's a little Allen screw in there, and that's the 2.5mm. And this you just want to have tightened to make sure that doesn't come out loose. Okay, now while we're on the subject of the folding mechanism, here's another tip. If you come around to the underneath side of it, right here, and this is a way you can tighten up your whole handlebar stem system so it doesn't give you any or very little forward-backward rocking. For example, I've got mine pretty tight right now, but if I were to push forward on the handlebars and back, I've got very, very little play here. You can see there's a little bit, it's kind of rocking because I'm on this stool here too, but I've got just a little bit of play here. And that's all going to depend on the adjustment of this nut down here. So if you tighten that nut up, it's going to raise that whole metal bar that it's coming through with that spring on it. There's a bolt with a spring going through the bar with the nut on the other end. By tightening that nut, you're raising that metal bar up. Basically this piece here will raise up in that slot. And if you tighten it as much as you can get, you're going to tighten up that stem so it has hardly any forward-backward movement. At that point, though, it will be very difficult to fold your handlebars down, atop the scooter. So that's what kind of that's for. If it's too loose, and there's really no too loose, I mean, it's not going to cause any problems other than you'll get more forward-backward movement. If you loosen this nut, in other words, bring it back down towards the end of the bolt, you're going to create more looseness. That whole metal bar will drop down. This will drop down in the slot, and that's going to give you more play in the handlebars, which some people don't like. To me, it doesn't bother me a whole lot, but because I don't fold these down, I've got mine cranked up there as tight as possible, so I have hardly any play in the handlebars there. So this is another one of those tips that you may not know. If you feel you have too much forward-backward play on the handlebars, go here. Tighten this nut up as much as possible, especially if you're not folding the handlebars. There's no need to have it any looser than, if you're not folding it, you probably want it as tight as possible like I do. That's a 10mm nut on there. And now I have a 10mm box wrench that I normally use on there. I use this on different places on the scooter, but it's kind of long. So if you have the handlebars up like this, you'll see the front wheel. Once you put that wrench on that nut, front wheel kind of is in your way. You can manipulate it and get it. But what I found is I went and found a small 10mm wrench. It's only 4 inches long or so, and that fits in there much better. I can get that on that nut real easy. And then my front tire is not impeding me from tightening that up or loosening it. Like right now, it's so tight, if I wanted to fold the handlebars, I probably couldn't. So I'd have to go in here and loosen this nut a little bit, bring it back down, this threaded bolt, and then I'd be able to fold the handlebars easier. If I go camping or something and throw this in the back of the truck for a long period of time, I would fold the handlebars down, you know, to save room and such, and then I just have to loosen this. Takes but 30 seconds, right? And then when I get to my destination, fold the handlebars back up, and I would crank this thing back up to give me the tightness on the handlebars again. So 10 millimeter nut right here. If you tighten it all the way, you're going to limit your amount of forward-backward play on the handlebars. If it may be hard to fold at that point, if you loosen it, then you're going to have easier folding, but you're also going to create a little more forward-backward play in the steering stem. One more thing about this, if you are going to adjust this, get yourself some WD-40, spray it up in there, it'll clean it off, make it much easier to loosen and tighten that nut on those threads. Okay, moving on to the chassis now, you have a couple of screws here. These are each 5 millimeter, again 5 millimeter Allen wrench. I've never had to tighten these, but all these screws from time to time you should go over every now and then, just make sure everything's tightened down, except for, of course, ones like the pivot point on this handle. Again, you don't want to crank that too much, and there's one on the back that you don't want too tight as well. We'll get to that in a minute. But again, these two here, 5 millimeter. There's two on each side, and again, those are 5 millimeter. Okay, these screws that are holding this light strip on the side, one on the front and one on the back, they're going to be 3 millimeter. I actually took mine all the way off once. There is a seal there, so if you do that, I've also resealed these with some silicone along the top just to try and make it more waterproof, though I don't ride in the rain or water. But actually mine, I took these off here and put this purple film on the inside, so my lights light up purple when I turn these on. I also did that purple film on the headlights as well, and mainly these headlights to me weren't giving off enough light, which is why I went and bought that. So that's my main headlight. These are just kind of secondary, you know, lights to be seen better. So I made those purple, made the side ones purple, and kind of, you know, as you can tell, I've painted my rims purple, springs purple, so I kind of went with a purple scheme on this scooter. Okay, your deck screws are going to be 4 millimeter. I've only got 4 in mine right now because I've been taking my deck off. There's 12 of them. These front two on each side of this, the mechanism here are just threaded in. There's no nuts on the bottom, so they're just threaded in. All the rest of them, the screws go completely through the frame, and then there's a 10 millimeter nut on the other end. So you could either use something like this, a 10 millimeter socket, on something like this to hold the nut on the bottom as you tighten or loosen the screw on the deck, or what actually I prefer and what I use, and I would recommend getting one of these because it's so handy and can serve a multitude of purposes for the scooter, is a channel locks, kind of like a long nose channel locks here, where you can adjust it and clamp it on and lock it into place at whatever size you want. This is why I actually use, so I'll go under here like this, grab my nut, lock it on there, and then I can loosen or tighten my screws as needed. Plus, I use this tool other places. You can use this in place of a wrench. You can use it to get into tight spaces, so this is very handy to have. I'd highly recommend getting one of these if you're going to be working on this scooter. Again, this one's a Milwaukee brand, and it's kind of like a long-nosed, I call it a vice grip. Looks like they call it torque lock. And I just picked this up at Home Depot or any hardware store like that. Okay, moving on to the shocks back here. We have a 5 millimeter screw going through with a 13 millimeter nut on the other side. So you can see I got my 5 millimeter Allen wrench on this side. I've got a 13 millimeter box wrench holding the nut on the other side, so if I wanted to remove my shocks, that's the way I'd be doing it. And this one up here is going to be a little harder to get at that nut on the other side, especially with your rear tire on. If your tire were off, it'd be a lot easier in your fender. So this is a little bit hard to get to. You can get to it with this box wrench, or again, I use those long nose vice grips to get into places like that. All right, this next one's very important here. We have this 8 millimeter, got an 8 millimeter Allen wrench into this 8 millimeter screw here. And this is the pivot point between the chassis and the whole rear end, your rear wheel slash motor. Qiewa calls this whole back piece here the motor mount. So everything rotates on this axle here. You can see it goes straight through to the other side, and there's a nut on the other side. This has to pivot on here. Now I've seen my friend's open box scooter came, and this was cranked down so tight that this could not move. That's going to render your suspension useless at that point. So you can't have this too tight. If you step on your scooter and push down on the rear deck here with your foot, and you're not getting any push on your suspension here, you should be able to push it down and have the springs push you back up. If it's just tight, then this thing's too tight. You cannot tighten this down all the way. It needs to be tight enough that it's holding everything in place without a lot of wobble, but not so tight where the suspension can't move. So again, 8 millimeter here. On the other side, I believe this is a 16 millimeter nut, but just to show you here, this tool I'm using again, the torque, I forget what they call it, torque lock, or I call it the channel locks, along those channel locks. You can adjust it to basically whatever size you want and just lock it in place. So this is a handy tool to have around. I use that a lot instead of just busting out the wrenches. Again, this whole piece here has to pivot. As you can see, there's the motor mount on the inside there, those 2 ears on the inside. That's where it mounts the chassis, and that has to be able to pivot or your suspension is going to be useless. Another tip, get some WD-40 every now and then and just spray it down in between the two metal pieces that are going to be rubbing against each other there, the motor mount ears to the chassis. On the other side, keep that a little bit lubricated, and it'll help everything move more smoothly in there. But again, I can't stress enough, do not over tighten this, or you're going to render your suspension useless. Again, with the scooter sitting on the ground, if you put your weight on the back of the scooter, you should see this, put your weight, basically your weight should be riding on these springs at all times. All right, well, we're at the shocks. Here's another tip about the shocks. You can adjust these to make a tighter suspension or a looser suspension. If you find out, maybe you're a heavier person and you're bottoming out the shocks, or it just seems like it's not stiff enough, you want a more stiffer ride. This is threaded here, so again, spray some WD-40 on it, clean it up good if it's dirty, spray some WD-40 on it, and turn this nut basically so you'll be compressing the spring. The tighter you compress the spring, the tighter your suspension is going to be. If you don't think you have a soft enough suspension, back the spring off counterclockwise, loosen it, bringing it back up the threads this way so the spring expands more, and then that's going to give you more of a more play in the suspension. So that's a way you can adjust this to make it tighter or looser. Okay, moving on to the brake mount, brake caliper and such. These two on top here, 5 millimeter. This is 5 millimeter, this is 5 millimeter, this is 5 millimeter, and this is 5 millimeter. These are some of these you can use to adjust the positioning of the outer brake pad. I've gone over that in some of my brake videos. If you're interested in adjusting your brakes, take a look at those videos. Again, these are just all 5 through here, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, and 5, all 5 millimeter. This one up here that's responsible for clamping your brake cable in place wherever you have it adjusted to is a 4 millimeter. Okay, this one here that goes into the caliper itself, there's a spring behind that. This is a 3 millimeter, and here's another tip. Make sure this thing's tight. You want this thing as tight as possible. If this screw comes loose or comes all the way out, if it comes too loose, your spring will pop and you will lose your rear braking. You want this tight enough so you can put your Allen key in there. Again, it's a 3 millimeter, and you want it tight enough so when you pull on the Allen key, it actually flexes the rear brake like that. I would check those from time to time. Again, if those come too loose, your back brake will fail. If that spring pops out of place, you're not going to have any rear braking. And beyond that, if you were to lose this screw or this piece, I guess it couldn't pop off because it's still attached there, but you could lose your brakes if this gets loose enough where the inner spring, which is behind this rubber piece, if this gets too loose, that spring will pop out of where it should be, and it's going to mess up your rear brakes. Again, if you have any questions about adjusting the brakes, I've got a couple videos out there, one for the rear, one for the front, on replacing brake pads, replacing the pads, and adjusting the brakes. Go out and take a look at those. Okay, you got two screws holding on this little bracket here, which kind of protects your motor wire and the end of the bolt that sticks through there. And these are 3mm on either side. Continuing on to the back wheel, if you get to the point where you need to change your tire, again, I have a video out there on the rear tire change. I think I call it rear tire change and more. There's 6 bolts in this ring that goes around the rim of the wheel. Those are 4mm. You can see I got my 4mm in the one right there. Of course, at this point, if you're changing your tire, you would have the whole wheel off of the scooter at this point. And if you would take out those 4 screws after you remove the rotor, and then this whole rim would separate, making it very simple to change the tire. You don't have to do any prying or anything. I've seen some other videos where people are trying to pry the tire off of the rim. You don't need to do that. If you remove these 6 screws, this outer rim piece comes off, tire slides right off. It's simple to do. Take a look at that video if you're going to get ready to change your rear tire. Okay, there's also 6 screws holding the rotor, this silver metal plate, which is what your brake pads squeeze onto to stop the scooter. There's 6 inner screws right here. They're also 4mm, so if you had your tire off, if you had the whole back wheel off, you would first remove these 6 to take the rotor off with this 4mm, and then you do that before you would go to the 6 on the rim there to remove that little rim to replace the tire. Okay, let's take a look at the front tire now, front wheel. And again, if you're changing this tire, again, you would take the whole tire, whole wheel off the scooter, and you have those same 6 bolts here, 4mm again. If you were to loosen these, you could pull this whole rim off and slide the whole tire off very easily. So these rotor screws on the front wheel are actually 3mm. Okay, on the front brakes, again, we have 5mm here, 5mm here, and then 5mm on both of these. Again, those can be loosened and moved in and out to do adjustment for your brakes. Watch my brake video, front brake video, if interested in that. Again, 4mm on this arm that clamps in your brake cable. And 3mm again on the center screw that holds in this brake arm to the caliper, and then underneath the rubber grommet there is the spring. Again, make sure this is tight. You always want this tight so you can go like this and move the arm when you have your Allen wrench on there. Again, if that gets too loose, the spring inside could pop out of place and you would lose your front brakes. Okay, your wheel nuts are 17mm, one on each side. If you remove your wheel, I suggest watching my front tire replacement video. And there are some spacers on the inside that you got to keep track of. And one's shorter on one side than the other one, so the short one will go on the brake side, longer one will go on the non-brake side, but you need to keep track of those. I suggest watching my front tire replacement video if you're going to be removing your front tire. Again, 17mm for your caps on the end. For your shocks, these are 19mm up top here. To take these caps off. The good thing about these shocks are if these caps are not actually holding the shock on. So you could take these caps off and the shocks aren't just going to fall out. So if you were riding or something, these caps came off, you're still good. This whole metal piece here, where the holes where these are coming through, are actually threaded, and the top of the shocks, of course, are threaded where these caps are coming on. but the shocks actually thread up through this metal plate. So even if I didn't have a cap on both sides here, these shocks aren't going anywhere. They're threaded in there, and then when they're attached to the tire, they obviously can't spin. So even without these caps, your shocks are going to be on there tight. There's no way they can come off of here. That's good. I like that. Now, if you're going to replace these shocks, I had to do that because we had one that was bent pretty bad due to a drop. My son kind of dropped his over and bent one of the shocks a little bit, and it didn't ride too good after that, so I had to buy some new shocks. I got them off AliExpress really cheap. Any pieces, like your tires, inner tubes, shocks, go to AliExpress. It's a Chinese website. It's safe. I've used it many times. There's another one called Alibaba, but they usually sell in more quantity where you can't just buy 1 and 2. Some stuff you can. But anyway, go on those websites. You will get these tires and inner tubes. I bought 4 of them because we have 2 scooters. I bought 4 tires, 4 inner tubes for $80. Qiewa website sells you 2 tires and inner tubes for like $110. It's way cheaper to get the tires off AliExpress or Alibaba. Same exact tire. You can tell by the looks of it. It's 10-inch. Anytime you get any parts. And same with these shocks. I got these shocks for like 2 of these shocks for $20. Where if you go on Qiewa, I don't know, it's like 80 maybe. I don't know. Same shock. Just do yourself a favor and save yourself some money if you're going to replace any of this stuff, especially your tires. Don't buy them directly off Qiewa. Go to Alibaba, AliExpress, and find them on there. They're called CST. If you go into their search engine, just type CST 10-inch scooter tire. They'll come up. You'll find them. And save yourself a lot of money by doing that. Okay, if you're going to remove these shocks, you see this metal thing here? It's kind of like an oval. It's flat on sides. It's kind of like an oval with flat sides. To unscrew those shocks, that's where this specialty wrench comes in. As you can see, it's very thin. It's thin on the edges, and you need that so you can, I'm not really going to do it now, but if you had your cap off here, you could get this wrench then on that metal piece there, and then start unscrewing it. And then once you got it loose, you could just unthread it by hand. Of course, your tire's off at that point. Your wheels there are disconnected, so you just have your shock hanging here by itself. And that's what this specialty wrench comes in here. A regular wrench, it's too thick. You can't effectively grab that piece without getting the metal on top too, and it's just going to give you all kinds of problems. So that's why I ended up getting this thing when I had to replace my shocks. Again, you can see it's like half the thickness of a regular wrench, and it's perfect size to be able to get onto that piece so you can unscrew that. Okay, I'm kind of looking through the front wheel now at the inner part of the caliper. That's where your brake pad is. It's a 5mm fits in there, and by turning it clockwise, you're going to push that inner brake pad in towards the rotor. Counterclockwise will bring it back out towards us, and that's how you adjust your inner brake pads on your caliper. Again, if you're going to do your brakes, I've got one for the back brakes, one for the front brakes, but it's a 5mm Allen wrench to be able to adjust that inner pad. Okay, to remove your back wheels, this nut here is an 18mm, or as you can see what I've done, I've going to use those long nose torque locks. Again, those are adjustable. You can make them any size you want, small, large, and then they clamp on there, so you can make it really tight. And to me, I love this tool. It's so versatile, and it eliminates the need for a lot of wrenches as well. You could also use an adjustable crescent wrench here if you wanted, or again, just an 18mm box wrench. Same on the other side. These rear wheels have like a locking nut that goes into the chassis there. Again, there's spacers, and the spacers are not all the same between the scooters. I've looked at 4 different scooters, and they don't have the exact same spacers on the inside. So if you take the rear wheel off, pay attention to where your spacers are, because they need to go back in the same place, or you're going to throw everything off spacing wise with your rear wheel. Again, watch my rear tire replacement video. Okay, so I think that pretty much covers just about everything as far as tools go and things you should snug up and check or may ever need to. Last thing is, I also have a voltmeter here. It's good to have a voltmeter. This one's self-ranging. I'd recommend self-ranging. Self-ranging meaning I can just put it to DC volts, and looks like my battery's going dead. And I can measure 2 volts or 50 volts or 100 volts, and it's going to automatically measure it. I don't have to, set a range for, oh, this is, 2 to 10 volts or 20 to 50 volts or whatever. It just automatically is self-ranging. You can get a decent meter. This is a Fluke. This is a really good one. You can get decent ones off Amazon, eBay for like 20 bucks or stuff. It's not going to be a Fluke, but you can get a decent voltmeter for around 20 bucks. It's good to have. You can measure your battery. If you take your deck off, unplug your battery from your controller, red to positive, black to negative, read the voltage on your battery, and you can use it to plug into your charger. You plug in your charger and you can measure the output pins on your charger. Charger should be showing you at least 54.4 volts, and that's what's going to charge your battery up to, which is a fully charged 48 volt battery, LiPo battery. If you measure your charger, it's only, who knows, maybe your charger is only charging your battery 50 volts instead of 54, and that's going to affect your range and your top end speed if your battery's not charged to its full capability. Just another quick note here on mine. I actually hooked up a meter, and you can see mine right now is reading 54.1 volt. A 48 volt battery fully charged is going to be 54.4. You'll notice mine says 71%. I changed my battery. I now have a 52 volt battery on here in my scooter, which gives me about 3 miles per hour top end more. And oh man, this thing's crazy fast with this battery in here. And anyway, so 54, what's really roughly about 100% charged with 48 volt battery is about 70% with this battery. 52 volt battery charges up to 58, roughly 58 and change, and so that's how I get more speed out of it, because you're pushing more voltage to the motor, which makes it spin faster. Anyway, that's about it for this one, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope it gave you some ideas of what tools you might need to get depending on what you plan on doing to the scooter. It's not a whole lot. Main thing is get yourself a good set of metric Allen keys like this one, ranging from this one ranges from 1.5 millimeter. It goes 1.52, 2.53, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 10. I don't know how much it costs. Probably around 20 bucks or so. It's worth just getting the whole thing instead of just buying them individually. Then again, you could get yourself a 10 millimeter socket on a handle like this. You could get box wrenches, or you could get an adjustable crescent wrench. But I would, before that, I would get yourself one of these channel locks, long nose channel locks, because it's more versatile than any wrench. You can lock it as tight as you want, as loose as you want. Takes the place of all these box wrenches. Gets into places that these wrenches won't be able to get into, including that one. And so that's about it for this one, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you got some ideas about what type of tools you might need. And look forward to some next videos coming up pretty soon. All right, guys. Take care. Peace out.